Good afternoon all. A quick and dirty attempt to solder some surface mount HCT 138s, which I don't think I need now, so they're just going to be practice pieces, onto these little boards with, what's this stuff called, solder paste, and also using a lamp holder and a halogen lamp to sort of heat it up. Let's give it a try. So I'm not going to be able to do this on the cutting mat, so let's push all that off the cutting mat. I think what I'm going to need is some cardboard to act as a sort of heat insulator, some metal to act as a sort of heat dissipator, and also so I can feel how hot the thing is getting. I kind of thought let's use a couple of Allen keys like that to put the circuit board in there, well, like that, with its little chip on there, and then lower the bulb down onto those Allen keys and get the whole thing really hot and try and get the solder to melt. I'd quite like to know what the temperature is inside this little furnace, so let's set this to degrees Celsius. What does H mean? Oh, I pressed the whole button. Okay, so oh, that's warmer than I thought it was in here. The fan heater is on, so if I put that in there, I can get an idea of how hot it's getting inside here. So maybe some blue tack to hold some of these components in place, although I don't want them too close to the furnace, otherwise it's all going to get a bit melty. Right, let's take off the end of the nozzle on the solder paste, put a little bit, yeah, there's no push downy thing on this, so I'm going to use this box spanner to push down on this, push a bit of the solder paste out. That should be enough, I guess. Let's just try and get that all off so I can at least put the end nozzle back on. Okay. So I know the lighting's not to usual standards here. Oh, this is rather pastier than I was hoping it would be. I was hoping it would be a little bit more runny, less viscous. So I'm going to have a job applying the correct amount to each pin. In fact, yeah, that's impossible. That's not going to work, is it? So maybe I'm going to have to go for the smear it all over approach. Yeah, the cocktail stick idea is a total disaster because this is, well, it's too thick, it's too viscous. Yeah, I mean, spreading that was impossible, so I've just got a sort of messy, it's just messy, it's just a mess. So is that all going to sort of soak up and capillary neatly onto each IC leg? This would have to be a lot thinner, in other words mixed with more liquid flux, I suppose, for this to be able to be dabbed neatly onto each contact. So well, let's just have a go at that and see if we get anywhere with it. So it's actually quite hard to see where to place the chip. Now I know that it should sort of self-align to a little extent. I think I've got that sort of fairly close. Okay, so now to just make it really hot. Right, I'm not sure about drawing a consistent 3 amps from my solar power 12 volts, so I've got a couple of PSUs here, 4 amp one and a 5 amp one. Let's use the 5 amp one, make up a little connector for the lamp, and just use mains to do this. It's going to be a bit more reliable probably. Right, here's my 12 volts. Let's put that on there. Let's plug the lamp into there and make sure it comes on and starts getting warm. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'm thinking is just put this on there and wait till I see about 200 degrees or something like that on the thermometer, and then just see whether that's actually soldered. Let's shove it on there and give it a try. Temperature's rising up. Can we see that? Yeah, 30. So I'm just going to wait till it gets to about 200. Well, now I've got problems with this thing getting hot. Maybe using an aluminium plate here wasn't such a brilliant idea, because of course it's just going to soak away heat. Yeah, this is really taking its time to get warm. Maybe I should have gone for an insulating base, which wouldn't suck all the heat out of my little oven there, but that's just going really slowly. So no, that's just not warming up to the sort of temperature I want. I've checked it a couple of times. That ceramic has stayed cold enough to touch for a while. I think it's a bit hot now. So maybe I'll get rid of the aluminium and just do this on the cardboard at the risk of it going a bit brown. because this is just climbing far too slowly. Right, so doing this on the cardboard, the camera certainly likes this better. It's a lot better from an exposure point of view. Let's see how hot that gets. Let's see whether I can get that up into the up above 100, say. Right, so I've got it to 100 degrees, but yeah, maybe 35 watts isn't really enough to do this, because it is climbing quite slowly. And I seem to remember that tin lead goes off at about, or melts at about 175, something like that. I'll look that up actually, but that's got a little way to go yet. Okay, Wikipedia says 183 degrees Celsius for the 6337 mix that I've got. So we've got a little way to go. But then I'm measuring the sort of air temperature inside my little chamber there. It's possible that the chip will get hotter than this is actually showing. So I am periodically lifting this up and checking it. But no, that's still a paste. One concern I'm having is that I'm evaporating off all the flux. And so when it finally gets hot enough, there isn't actually going to be any flux left for when the solder starts to melt, and I'm just going to get a horrible blobby mess. But well, we'll see. Right, I'm up to 150. It all feels quite hot, and when I lift this, I do get little wisps of smoke coming off. And of course, lifting it up, the temperature drops. So every time I lift it up, I'm making it worse. But there's no sign of the solder melting yet. Right, 170 degrees. Let's lift this up. Ah, the solder has melted. I can see a bridge between two pins of the chip. But yeah, it looks like that has actually soldered. So let's disconnect the lamp. That's going to be really hot for a while. And take a closer look at the chip. Right, well, here it is. But there's a lot of kind of solder splatter around here. There's a bridge between pins, what's that, 5 and 6. Pin 1 doesn't look like it's got any solder on it at all. Possibly pin 8 doesn't have any solder on it. Let's turn that around. It's cooled down quite a bit. Now there's a bridge there between 4 and 5. It's just a bit of a mess. And it took so long for this thing to heat up. You can just about make out the 74HCT138 there. That I wonder whether the chip just got far too hot. I'd have to test this. That pin there, which is pin 9, isn't it? That doesn't look like it's soldered either. So I mean, there's so much rework I'd have to do here with the soldering iron that, yeah, that was all a bit of a failure, really. Yeah, I still think in order to make this work, I really need to spread this solder paste more accurately onto the individual pads on this board, but it's so thick you can't pick up the sort of amount you want. It just picks up in big globs, and therefore I'm not going to be able to accurately place it onto each of these 16 pads. I'm just smearing it around very imprecisely, and that's giving rise to all this splatter, some of the pins not actually having enough solder on them to actually solder. I mean, the solder has melted, but you know, it took so long. It took about 10 minutes to get this thing up to temperature. So maybe 35 watts just isn't enough to get this hot enough quickly enough to just get it to solder quickly. Yeah, some issues here. So I'm going to try reworking this with the soldering iron. I'm just going to use my flux pen to apply some more flux on there, but I don't know. I'm not sure the pen really is going to apply enough. I probably need to bathe this in flux, perhaps from I don't know, some liquid flux and a little paintbrush or something, but I'll put as much as I can on there with the pen. Doesn't seem to be doing an awful lot. And let's have a go with the soldering iron. This mains power one's probably not quite hot enough yet, but let's just see if I can pick up some of this detritus here and then try pulling out that. No, that's just not working, is it? I can't even pull out that solder bridge between those two pins. I'm going to have to use some wick, I think. Right, well, with some wick and also using this solder, just dipping the iron in and reapplying it, I've soldered the pins that had no solder on. I've lifted most of the solder detritus. I've removed the bridge. But really this is not satisfactory to have a mess created by the reflow process and then fix it all with the soldering iron. Not very happy with this. There's a closer look at this side of the chip. I don't think we've got any solder bridges. The solder looks reasonably consistent there. As I say, most of the mess has been picked up. I wish my camera had a fixed focus capability. It doesn't. But yeah, I just wish it had been a little more neater in the sort of oven stage, so that I needed to do less in the sort of manual soldering iron rework afterwards stage. And there's the other side, which I've just reworked with the soldering iron. I think that's all good. I think that chip's soldered properly onto all the pads. I think perhaps what I'll do next is build a little circuit to test this and make sure it's fully functional as a 138, which is a 3-bit binary to 1 of 8 decoder. Yeah, I might give that a try and see if I can test this chip. So, first attempt at a quick and dirty bit of surface mount soldering with solder paste and a very crude reflow oven. Well, it kind of worked, but it's a bit meh. Cheerio.